Lifelover is one of the most unique bands to come out of the Swedish black metal scene. When most people talk about Swedish black metal, they talk about satanic true cult bands like Marduk, Dissection and Watain, which alongside the Norwegian scene are like the golden standard that every band should follow according to black metal purists. Lifelover is the complete opposite of these bands. Instead of trying to seem as dark and evil as possible and follow all the black metal clichés, they develop their own aesthetic and sound based around Swedish melancholy, which capture the essence of their home country better than your average Scandinavian band. The band have been lumped into the depressive black metal scene, which is often frowned upon for glorifying depression and self-harm, and also being uninspired and try-hard. Lifelover, however, barely fits in this scene either. Sure, their lyrics are often about hatred and depression, but they are just genuine reflections of the members' state of mind, and at times they are even positive or call out the glorification of these subjects. If you have to put a label on Lifelover's music, DSBM would be the most fitting, but it's way more in the vein of post-punk, indie rock, and various other genres. The only elements of Lifelover that really fits into the DSBM tag is the lyrical themes, screaming, and occasional tremolo riffing. Otherwise, Lifelover plays their own unique style of metal with ideas that was rarely explored in metal at the time. While the band was only active for about 6 years, they helped create a new wave of depressive black metal and even influenced artists outside of the genre. Still, they don't get much attention in discussions about Swedish metal and are left in the shade of the true cult bands. Hopefully this video will show people that Lifelover is much deeper than teen angst and self-harm glorification and was one of the most original and boundary-pushing bands out there.
Until the day you die, you, not me, will always be shit.
Lifelover had quite a lot of members throughout the band's brief existence, but one of the most important ones is the semi-official frontman and co-founder Kim Karlsson, whose discography spans the furthest back in time. His career dates back to 2003 in the Swedish city Östersund, where he began releasing demos with his first project Hypothermia. Hypothermia started as a duo consisting of Kim on vocals and guitar and someone called Patrick on drums, who together recorded 2 demos called Sapphy and Irritable and Suicide Fixation, released in 2003 and 2004 respectively. These tapes were lo-fi and slow depressive black metal that served as the first steps in Kim's artistic evolution before he found his style. His vocals hadn't developed yet to the tormented shrieks on later Hypothermia works or the intense screaming present on Lifelover records, and the music is average depressive black metal that would be perfected on later Hypothermia records. After these releases, Patrick was replaced by Nachtsight, who at the time was a member of the band Durthang, and now is more famous from the ambient black metal project Luster. Kim and Nachtsight played together in 3 different sessions between 2004 to 2006 in the countryside of Östersund. During these sessions, they started to develop the sound of early Hypothermia, with for example the demo tapes Självdestruktivitet född av monotona tankegångar 1 and 2, split records with Durthang, Arkasva and others, and most importantly the full-length records Veins, Skuld and Rakbladsvalsen. In my opinion, Veins is the most interesting out of these releases, since it's where Hypothermia starts shaping into one of the most iconic DSBM bands. The music is ritualistic and melancholic, and has vocals from Kim that sounds like pure existential dread. I honestly don't think any of his later performances on Lifelover records reached the same level of agony that's being expressed here. Even on the most unhinged songs by Lifelover, Kim still sounds human, and if you know Swedish, you can decipher some of the lyrics, but here the vocals just sound like shrieks of severe pain. Some of these records were released through Kim's own label Insikt, which he ran between 2004 to 2007. Insikt released cassettes by different underground black metal bands around the world, alongside Hypothermia's album Veins. Some of the bands that released tapes through the label include Sjukdom and the classic Czech DSBM band Trist. But the most notable band to release albums through Insikt is the Swedish band Woods of Infinity, which released their 2005 albums Hejdå and Ljuset, and the 2007 album Hamtjärn on the label. The reason why these weirdos are important to a documentary about Lifelover is that there are some elements in their music that would later appear on Lifelover's first album Pulver, such as the programmed drums, frequent sampling from Swedish media, and the occasional spoken word sections. So I think it's safe to say that Woods of Infinity was an influence on early Lifelover. According to an interview with Kim on the blog Kaleidoscope, there was a split release planned between Hypothermia and Woods of Infinity that never released. There is, however, a Hypothermia song called Att älskas available online that was meant to be on the split. There is also a bootleg or demo of sorts called Altar of the Wistful by Woods of Infinity, whose cover art looks like it could be the inspiration for Pulver, with a girl in a bra lying in leaves with WOI written in blood on her stomach. According to Rate Your Music, it was released in 2003, but I can't confirm this, or if it's even an official picture taken by the band. Something that Lifelover thankfully didn't take after is the messed up lyrics. Check the lyrical contents on Metal Archives if you don't know what I mean. One returning customer of Kim's label was Jonas Bergqvist from Stockholm, who at the time was known as Nattal and now known as B in Lifelover. Around 2004, Jonas had a new black metal band called Dimhymn, which he wanted to get signed to Insikt. Dimhymn consisted of Jonas and the drummer Alex, aka Nordsjäl, and started out under the name Dunkel, under which they released a very limited demo called Dark and Bleeding Journey in early 2004, before the name change. Kim and Jonas got in touch and started to email back and forth, and Jonas sent Kim different songs he was working on. Kim released Dimhymn's first demo, Det enda eviga, on cassette, and it's pure true cult black metal, both in music and image. The music is in the vein of old Scandinavian bands, with cold tremolo riffs and the drumming alternating between mid-tempo and fast blast beats. The lyrics are about death and Satan, and the band picture in the booklet shows Jonas and Alex in corpse paint and typical black metal attire. Dimhymn and Insikt's relationship continued in 2005 with the release of Dimhymn's first full-length album, Fördärvets maskineri, which Insikt once again released on cassette. The album continues in the same footsteps as Det enda eviga, but with a different, more angry vocal delivery and some punk influence. In my opinion, this is the best Dimhymn album, and it's a hidden gem in Swedish black metal that doesn't get its proper recognition. These Dimhymn releases was some of the very few true Satan and death worshipping black metal releases that came out of Stockholm at the time, with Ondskapt being the only relevant contemporary band releasing that type of music. Dimhymn would therefore start to gain some traction in the Swedish black metal underground through these releases and the collaboration with Insikt. In the summer of 2005, Kim and Jonas met up for the first time and went to Jonas' father's house to finish Dimhymn's second album Djävulens tid är kommen, on which Kim would do guest vocals, and they would eventually make something more if they had the motivation. The first thing they did when arriving wasn't finishing the album, but to drink alcohol and cut each other with razors. In Kim's own words from his Pulver feature video, they turned the place into a slaughterhouse, and it didn't stop there. After a while they went out in the woods to an abandoned house and kept going. Kim smashed a window of the house and cut up most of his fingers, which is something that would have a big impact on the music they would record later that night. When they finally decided to record some music and finish up Dimhymn's album, They also recorded what would be Lifelover's first release. An almost 1 hour long double-sided live tape titled Promo 2005 was recorded, on which the influence of their trip to the woods could be heard. The tape includes 2 lengthy songs of simplistic guitar improvisations that were so drenched in reverb and delay that it basically turns into dark ambient, with barely any vocals except for some occasional ghastly background noises from Kim. The simplicity was partly due to the self-harm during the day and the wounds on Kim's fingers reopening if he moved them across the guitar. Kim have also mentioned that him and Jonas was big fans of the German black metal band Bethlehem and their debut record Dark Metal, which had slow and simple guitar riffs, but this influence can't really be heard. The promo tape doesn't bear any resemblance to other Lifelover releases, but for fans of black metal urban legends, this is basically what people want Abruptum and similar bands to be. There are many bands that are rumored to harm themselves during recordings, but Lifelover's promo tape is literally the result of someone slashing all their fingers by breaking a window of an abandoned house just to have something to cut himself with. The way they came up with the name Lifelover partly stemmed from an interaction with a label called Death Propaganda. Death Propaganda was a short-lived label that released tapes by underground black metal bands, just like Insect, but was more into the death and Satan worshipping bands in the vein of Dissection. Whoever ran the label thought that Kim and Jonas wasn't true death worshippers and called them out for being fucking Lifelovers on the internet, which Jonas and Kim ended up running with as the band name. Since these people wouldn't take their music seriously anyways, they might as well take an unserious band name to mock them. The Lifelover tape was released in June of 2005, and 2 months later, Dimhymns album Djävulens tid är kommen was also released. After this, Jonas and Kim started hanging out more in person, and Jonas would be present at one of the Hypothermia recording sessions mentioned earlier. In the beginning of 2006, Jonas joined the recording session in Östersund when Rakbladsvalsen and Skuld by Hypothermia was made, but also some Hypothermia songs that would end up on a split between Hypothermia and Dimhymn. The split would be called Sjuklig intention and released by Eerie Art Records in July of 2006. In regard to the history of Lifelover, I think Dimhymn's part of the split is the most interesting. The music is still proper black metal with a dose of punk, like on the previous albums, but the sound has evolved and has a lot of elements that will become more prevalent on later Lifelover albums. For example, the opening track, Dracophorism, starts with a sample from the movie The Shining and has piano and dark ambient interludes interrupting the song abruptly, making it sound like something from the album Erotik, but more black metal. The song Projektil also sounds an awful lot like something from a later Lifelover album, with its clean guitar melody in the intro and the piano sample in the outro of the song. That song also features Fredrik Gråby from the band Ondskapt doing additional vocals. The aesthetic of the cover art is also moving more towards the one of Lifelover and Erotik, with a bleak picture of a highway bridge. About a week after the Östersund session, Kim and Jonas went to Stockholm to start recording some ideas for new Lifelover songs. These ideas would turn into some of the most iconic songs of their careers, namely Nackskott, MS Salmonella and Stockholm. This was the start of the Pulver recording process and the real start of Lifelover. When Kim and Jonas started recording the songs for Pulver, it was only meant to be an EP or a demo, and they had yet to add any new members. They didn't even recruit a drummer before finishing their tracks, but decided to do all the drums with a drum machine. After the tracks were done, they sent them to friends, who in turn sent them to some labels. The label Gota Warex liked what they heard and requested them to do a full length, so they started writing the rest of the songs on Pulver. While making the record, more members was being added to the band. Jonas was a big fan of Slipknot and thought that the more members, the better the band, so he started adding people that he thought fit the concept of Lifelover. For Pulver, the new members were Johan Gabrielsson, who had shown Jonas some poems he had made earlier, and Rickard Öström, who at the time had a band called Sjukdom. However, it was still Kim and Jonas who did the instrumentation on the album, and the new members only contributed with some lyrics and additional vocals. For the release of the album, all the members of the band adopted different pseudonyms. This was to prevent labels and distributors from mentioning Hypothermia and Dimhymn when promoting the band, since they wanted it to be the complete opposite from their previous bands. Kim's pseudonym was Brackets, since he was against pseudonyms, and Brackets was close to nothing. Jonas' pseudonym was B, simply the first letter of his last name. Johan's pseudonym was 1853, which is the year that Van Gogh was born, the Crimean War started, and the first intravenous needle was invented. Rickard's pseudonym was LR, which I don't know what it stands for. The plan to hide their identities went well, and the band didn't reveal their names until after the release of their second album Erotik in 2007. For the rest of the video, I'm going to refer to all of the members by their pseudonyms, except for Kim Karlsson, since he's more famous under his real name. Pulver was released in July of 2006, just a day after the split between Dimhymn and Hypothermia. The album is certainly different from everything the members had done up until this point, both in the music and the aesthetic. Starting with the cover art, it's one of the most vibrant artworks I've seen for a metal record, without feeling like a gimmick. It features Kim's friend Elinor, naked and covered in blood, lying in a field of wood anemones. The bright green field and the white flowers is a typical scenery of the Swedish spring and is a sign of brighter times to come. This contrasted with a bloody naked girl perfectly captures the vibe of the music on Pulver. A lot of the guitar work on the album is very upbeat and out of context almost sound happy. There's also piano melodies and samples from Swedish children TV shows, further adding to what could have been a feel-good album. But these elements, mixed with intense screaming about hatred and depression, and samples from much more disturbing movies, makes all of this feel manic rather than happy. The music is often labeled as depressive black metal, and while there are some things in Lifelover's music that are reminiscent of black metal, such as occasional tremolo riffs and the screaming, this album sounds more like an unhinged post-punk album with metal influences. The only black metal band that I would say have something in common with Lifelover, not counting the bands they influenced, are the aforementioned Woods of Infinity. As said before, they share some elements like the drum machine, the Swedish samples, and the similar clean vocal deliveries. But Lifelover is by no means a rip-off musically or lyrically, and aside from these few elements, it's more so their attitude to black metal and what is considered acceptable in the genre, and the contrast between beautiful and deranged that I think connects the bands. Woods of Infinity is however much more black metal influenced, while Lifelover sounds more like metal-tinged post-punk, as said before. This sound is something that the members labeled narcotic metal. The tag is probably just a reference to the members at the time heavy drug use, but it works well for the emotionally unstable punk metal mix of Lifelover. Even the pacing of the album feels very drug-inspired, with the first half being like the peak of a drug binge, and the second half being like a calm down, with more anxious and slower songs. The best example of the first half sounding like a drug binge is the opener Nutspot, which kickstarts with one of the most iconic guitar melodies in extreme metal. This has to be the most danceable metal song ever made, without being cheesy or overly ironic. The reason the song doesn't feel as cheesy as other bands making bouncy guitar melodies is the contrast with Kim's screaming and the lyrics. The hateful vocals about society make the song sound like a mental breakdown. The song ends with a sample from the song Boomsika Boom from the Swedish children's show Emil i Lönneberga, based on Astrid Lindgren's books. Astrid Lindgren is Sweden's most revered author, and the TV shows based on her works are a recurring theme on the first two Lifelover albums, and adds a lot to the uneasy atmosphere. The following song, MS Salmonella, is the only song on the album that actually sounds like a black metal song. This is because it was originally intended for Dimhymn, but after the piano melody was added, it was better suited as a Lifelover song. This mix of black metal and piano melodies is something that would later define some of Lifelover's biggest songs, like Cancertid and Mental Central Dialog, but then with less obvious black metal influence. Here everything is much more raw, with tremolo riffing and screaming, and a kind of edgy movie sample of a park shooting. The sample is from the 98 Todd Solondz movie Happiness, and specifically from a scene where one of the main characters dreams about shooting up a park. This movie kind of uses the same contrast as Pulver, where the scenery in the movie is very vibrant and beautiful, but the subject matter is extremely dark. The following three songs, Mitt öppna öga, Kärlek, becksvart melankoli, and Vardagsnytt, follows the same formula as the prior two tracks. Mitt öppna öga and Vardagsnytt got the same post-punk bounce as Nackskott, and Kärlek, becksvart melankoli is another piano track like MS Salmonella. There isn't too much to say about these tracks, except that they're great, and that Mitt öppna öga samples some weird ambient noise music and moaning, which comes from a movie called Ett hål i mitt hjärta, which I will talk more about later. After these songs comes the ambient interlude Avbrott 6, which works like a transition between the two parts of the album. After this, the calm down part, as I call it, starts, with the song Stockholm. The song is much more sparse and uncanny than the previous songs, and the instrumental just reeks of regret and misery. There are some really cool elements in the song that makes it stand out, like the shimmering sound before the drums comes in, and the whistling in the middle of the song that adds to the uncanny atmosphere. The vibe of the song and Lifelover in general are explained well by two lines in the lyrics, which translated to English are "Everything has such a melancholic luster tonight, and is it beautiful or repulsive?" The track Sunda is the only song on the album that is somewhat forgettable. It's like a slower version of the songs in the first half, but without the groove, infectious melodies, and movie samples. Herrens Hand is just like Stockholm, a more sparse track, but even more stripped down. There is only some simple clean guitar and piano melodies, leaving room for the vocals, which are the main focus. The lyrics are written by 1853 and are a bit more poetic than the rest of the lyrics on the album. Just like the songs that 1853 would write for later albums, such as Besatt and Cancertid, the lyrics are more abstract and open for interpretation than the usually pretty straightforward lyrics by B, Kim and LR. According to 1853 himself, the lyrics are about being in a compulsive state of mind and being led by something you don't have control over. There is also another movie sample in the song, which comes from the 95 crime thriller Seven. Medicinmannen is a collage of noise music and various Astrid Lindgren movies and shows, and works as an unsettling interlude. The noise music makes the otherwise joyful samples of children talking and singing just sound disturbing. The next song, Nästa gryning, starts with a sample from the aforementioned movie Ett hål i mitt hjärta, or A Hole in My Heart in English. If Pulver was a movie, it would be this one. It's about a father and his friend shooting porn movies in his house while his loner son hides in his room. And the sample in question is from a scene where the father and his friend is about to film a fake snuff scene. The movie, just like Pulver, is very depraved, but with some scenes of beauty and almost joy, and deals with broken people and severe mental issues. The movie is directed by Lukas Moodysson, who is one of Sweden's most renowned directors. He's more known for the Swedish classic Åmål, which will reappear when talking about the next album Erotik. He has also directed the movie Lilja Forever, which noise fans might recognize from the cover art for Prurient's compilation Cocaine Death. Nästa gryning ends with a sample of the classical composer Frederick Chopin's piece Raindrop Preludium. The closer of the album and Song of Day is probably the only diss track in black metal history. The lyrics are about the type of people that called the band out for not being true enough and how their death worship personas are just a facade to feel special. The song ends with a very fitting movie quote, once again from the movie Happiness.
And your shit until the day you die. You, not me, will always be shit.
Just a few months after Pulver was released, Lifelover already had a new guitarist by the name of H and a new album ready. The follow-up Erotik was released on the label Total in the beginning of 2007, and according to Kim and 1853's feature video about the album, not much is remembered from the time period around its creation. Just like when recording Pulver, the members did a lot of drugs and drank a lot of alcohol while making the album, so for Erotik the members were kind of in a haze during the recording sessions. This destructive lifestyle with the drugs and self was also a reason for the fast writing process. Kim has mentioned in his videos that B had the mindset that he might not survive until the next album is released, so he wanted to make as much music as fast as possible. And while a rushed writing process might indicate a sloppy album, Erotik turned out to be an absolute masterpiece. In my opinion, it's Lifelover's best album and the one where they fully found their own sound. Pulver felt like it was inspired by Woods of Infinity, but that influence isn't heard here. Instead, the music feels very inspired by Swedish indie rock music, with a lot of melancholic guitar melodies and clean vocals. The only other band I can think of that sounds slightly like Erotik is the Norwegian Joyless and their album Wisdom and Arrogance. Just as with Woods of Infinity, Lifelover doesn't sound too much like Joyless, but they have a similar mix of indie rock, post-punk and black metal, and fans of Erotik might find some enjoyment in Wisdom and Arrogance. The mood of Erotik is best described by the Swedish word vemod, which is a specific type of sadness caused by nostalgia and that can be triggered by beautiful scenery. It's basically the feeling of watching the sunset while reminiscing about everything you lost in life, which is the state of mind that this album puts me in, especially the second half of the album. Erotik can, just like Pulver, be split up into two different parts. The first half of the album being more aggressive with a heavy post-punk influence, and the second half of the album being like a calm down with more emotional songs. On this album, however, even the aggressive tracks are very melancholic due to B's clean singing. On the songs Sweet Illness of Mine and Dödens Landsväg, his false but emotional singing makes me think of the legendary Swedish indie rock band Broder Daniel. Not in the exact way he sounds, but in the way that his amateurish singing adds more emotion to the music. There's also the ambient intro Förspel och intrång that doesn't sound like the average black metal intro, which usually is either simple dark ambient or dungeon synth. Förspel och intrång is rather piano music with some otherworldly sounds in the background that has the same creepy yet soothing atmosphere as, for example, Have a Nice Life song, A Quick One. However, the highlights from this part of the album are the songs I Love to Hurt You and Välkommen till Pulver City. I Love to Hurt You starts with some bouncy post-punk riffing and mid-paced black metal drums before the unhinged vocals come in and the song takes a darker turn. The most iconic part of the song and the album in general is the piano section with a sample from the Swedish children's show Skrotnisse. Skrotnisse was a puppet show from 1985 based on a book by the author Jan Löf. It's intended for children, but it's questionable whether it's actually suitable for kids, with its creepy atmosphere and somewhat depressing subject matter. The plot is about a loner genius who is being harassed by an engineer who wants to steal his book about his inventions, so he ends up having to leave Earth to escape. Välkommen till Pulver City gives the vibe of a house party that's about to end in tragedy. Especially the clapping in the second half of the song sounds like people cheering someone on to keep drinking or doing more drugs, which is almost what the sample in the end is about. The sample is taken from the Swedish cult classic action movie Sjukdom and a scene of a bad drug binge. After this, the album goes into the calm down part. Just like on Pulver, the songs in the second half of the album are more sparse and emotional, but while the songs on Pulver was more anxious, the ones on Erotik continues with the same feeling of so-called vemod, but with less ferocity. Saltvatten, Du och jag vs. Tellus, is the most depressing song on the album, with gloomy guitars and deadpan lyrics about life getting worse and feeling betrayed. Besatt got the same vibes, but with fuller post-punk instrumentation and more poetic lyrics. The lyrics were written by 1853, and for him they are about transformation in life and water being a symbol of a mirror towards something else, which is pretty vague and up for interpretation for the listener. The best song of the calm down part and a top 5 Lifelover song of all time is Höstdepressioner. The song sounds like a darker variant of the aforementioned Broder Daniel rather than anything related to black metal. It perfectly captures the emotion of vemod with the false but emotional clean singing and the melancholic guitar melodies. The samples used in the song matches the mood perfectly. The first sample in the middle of the song is from the 1969 TV show version of the children's book Pippi Långstrump by Astrid Lindgren. The sample is about a sakletare, which is a made-up word and roughly translates to thing searcher, someone who searches for things. In the context of the show, the word doesn't have any deeper meaning, but in the context of the song, it could be interpreted as someone who searches for things in their life to give it purpose. The sample in the end of the song is another scene from Skrotnisse. The scene is about the loner genius leaving Earth in a spaceship to never return again. And when watching this scene as a kid, I didn't realize how extremely dark the scene was, since it's basically a metaphor for self-deletion. But to be fair, the whole show was very creepy and dark throughout, and probably traumatized a lot of kids. Humörets bottenvåning breaks up the melancholic mood with the dark ambience and trip-hop elements, and wheezed vocals about disdain for someone. The lyrics feels more like something from Pulver, and the album's more hateful themes, but they can't really be heard, even if you know Swedish, and the instrumental works well with the rest of Erotik. Museum of Past Affections is just like Höstdepressioner, more of an indie rock track, but with some more black metal influenced drumming. This is another one of my favorite Lifelover tracks of all time, and it's them at their most beautiful. The song ends with a classical piece called Te Deum Opus 25, composed by the Swedish composer Otto Olsson. The album ends with the song Nitlott, with an opening that fittingly sounds like the end credits to a movie. After a few minutes, the song switches up and goes into some Durutti column sounding guitar playing with a sample from the movie Åmål. The movie is a classic Swedish teen drama about forbidden love and growing up in a small town in Sweden. The remainder of the song is MS Salmonella from Pulver played backwards, before the song ends with some more guitar picking and what sounds like a gunshot to close the album. Moving on to the aesthetics of the album, the cover art for Erotik is a blurry picture of Stockholm in the nighttime, taken from the tower Kaknästornet, which is a famous landmark in Stockholm. This is my favorite cover art from Lifelover, since the blurry view with the distant city lights gives such a lonely and melancholic feeling, just like the songs on the album. The booklet also has a lot of images taken around Stockholm with the same atmosphere, like sunsets, flowers, and nighttime views of the city. The aesthetic of the images brings together the whole atmosphere of the album and sets Lifelover apart from other black metal adjacent bands. After Erotik, Lifelover hit some bumps in the road. In April of 2008, LR left the band, and somewhere around this time, B had an overdose and was hospitalized in the city of Strömstad. But thankfully everything turned out fine, and in September of the same year, the band managed to play their first live show at the bar Harry B. James in Stockholm. For the show they didn't use a drum machine, but got a real drummer who went by the pseudonym S. Most of the show is available on YouTube and shows some of Kim's very iconic dancing. At the show, they played an unreleased song called Brand, which would appear on their new album Konkurs, released in October a few weeks later on the label Avantgarde Music. For this album, they also recruited the bass player Felix Öhlén, aka Fix, who is now a member in the band Kall, which is the band that Kim, H and Fix started after Lifelover. More about that later. Konkurs closes what is one of the best 3-album runs in metal, and is in my opinion the most well-polished Lifelover album, with some of the edge of the earlier albums being gone. It's a good starting point for people who are new to Lifelover's discography, especially the song Cancertid. The cover art may look like some abstract art at first, but it's actually a picture of ice formations by the Swedish lake Vättern. It's a bit hard to see when only looking at the cover, but if you look at the back of the album and some of the pictures in the booklet, the theme of ice and winter is more clear. The theme of winter reflects in the music, which sounds a bit colder than on the previous albums. It's still the same post-punk and metal mix, but a lot of songs sound darker, pretty much like a winter evening in Sweden. The album opens with Shallow, one of the more black metal sounding tracks on the album. It sounds a bit like a more aggressive and polished version of MS Salmonella from Pulver. There are a lot more of these piano tracks on the album than the previous ones, and these piano melodies are like a signature sound for Lifelover's biggest songs. Mental Central Dialog is one of these fan favorites on the album, and one of my personal favorites as well. Aside from the piano melody, it's really the vocals of the song that makes it stand out. The lyrics are very simple and repetitive, but the delivery makes it sound like the inner monologue of someone having a mental breakdown. It's just Kim repeating the phrases, "I'm not finding any answers," and "Is there any answers?" over and over, but with more and more desperation, until the middle of the track, when the realization hit that there are no answers. Brand is the most intense song on the album, and have what I think is the most insane vocal performance from Kim on any Lifelover song. There are so many shrieks and screams that sounds like pure hatred, and the lyrics definitely matches the energy. Cancertid is another standout song on the album, being a beautiful song with only clean singing. The lyrics are written by 1853 and have the most emotional backstory that I know of to any Lifelover song. According to him, they were written after he had been tripping on mushrooms all night, and his mother called him with the news that his grandmother had passed away from cancer. The lyrics are a reflection of this, and being self-destructive and feeling like a cancer to the world, but somewhat poetic and abstract. The context of the lyrics makes the sample in the end pretty dark. It's the greeting you heard at the time if you call the emergency number in Sweden, for example if you need an ambulance. Convulsion changes things up and replaces the piano with what sounds like an accordion, which is a really odd but refreshing choice for a metal song that isn't cheesy folk metal. The song ends with a sample from the Swedish polka song Fröjd på vischan by Kall. The following songs, Twitch and Narcotic Devotion, are some of the harder tracks on the album, both with piano melodies. But Twitch doesn't use the piano the same way the other songs do. Instead of adding Melancholy to the track, it comes in the end with heavy distortion, making the already creepy song sound even creepier. Narcotic Devotion are more on the beautiful side, but with occasional heavier metal riffs. The song got 2 samples from the classic Swedish TV show Rederiet.
Jag har många gånger under de här åren funderat på vad jag skulle säga till dig om allt blev uppdagat. Man kan inte vara bäst på allting.
Alltid Aldrig might sound like a depressive song to people who don't know Swedish due to the screaming and the melancholic guitars, but it's kind of a heartwarming song. The song is about for once in a while feeling happy and being able to breathe, and being so grateful for the people around you that the feeling turns into some type of sadness. A song like this is one of the reasons why I appreciate Lifelover so much more than most of the bands in the DSBM scene, that their music and lyrics are so genuine that they can make a song about being happy and not plaster on a dark and depressive image just for the sake of it. Stängt PGA Semester is the most down-tempo song on Konkurs and has some sort of jazz rhythm going on. The lyrics may seem philosophical and about how simple the average person is regarding their dreams in life. But the backstory to the song, according to a Q&A with Kim in 1853, is that Kim was pissed off that almost all of the places in the town Jönköping was closed during Christian holidays, so he wrote the lyrics thinking about how he wanted to destroy everything and everyone in the town. If you're listening to the album on Spotify, the titles for the next 2 songs, Original and Bitter Reflektion, have been mixed up. If you look at the booklet, the instrumental song is called Original, while on Spotify it's Bitter Reflektion. There isn't much to talk about regarding these tracks, except that Original has a sample of a female friend to someone in the band. I've heard that it was B's girlfriend, but I can't verify this. It's hard to decipher what the girl is saying even if you know Swedish, but I'll put a translation of what I think she's saying on the screen. The last 3 songs, Mitt Annexia, Spiken i kistan, and En tyst minut, is to me like a trilogy about someone ending their life. I don't know if there's an intentional storyline throughout these songs, or if I'm reading too deep into them, but I feel like different stages of deciding to end everything. In the Q&A with Kim in 1853 explains that Mitt Annexia is about entering the nothingness, while also being a tribute to the author William S. Burroughs. The lyrics were written as a poem several years before the song, and was then kind of what 1853 thought would be his last words. A side note is that the picture in the booklet for Mitt Annexia is taken in the emergency ward in the city of Strömstad, where B was hospitalized after his overdose. The lyrics to the following song, Spiken i kistan, meaning a nail in the coffin, is like the aftermath of entering the nothingness and letting everything go, expressing a desire to die and provoking people just to get killed. En tyst minut translates to a quiet minute, and the song is basically that. A minute with just static and a clock ticking, as if to honor someone who have just passed away. After Konkurs, both the live drummer S and 1853 left the band, but for the first time in the band's history, they would get a real drummer to play on a release. They recruited Joel Malmén, aka Non, to play drums and write some lyrics for their new EP Decadence, released almost exactly a year after Konkurs on Osmose Productions. This is one of the most divisive releases in Lifelover's catalog, with some songs being some of Lifelover's biggest hits, while a lot of people was very disappointed with the EP when it first dropped. One reason for the disappointment was the real drums, since a lot of people had gotten used to the drum machine. But there are some other differences that I personally think makes the EP less enjoyable than the previous albums. The first thing is the aesthetic. The previous albums had cover arts and booklets that had a big contrast between dark and disturbing and beautiful, but for Decadence the cover art and the majority of the pics in the booklet just feel bleak and filthy, with mostly photos of empty metro stations and city landscapes with a disgusting brown nuance. The aesthetic looks more like something from the electronic genre Witch House, especially the picture for the song Major, with its bold pink text that looks like it could be the cover art for something by Salem or Antonio Urdiales. The imagery definitely isn't inspired by Witch House, since the genre was barely a thing when this EP was recorded, but Lifelover have some connections to the genre. 1853 have mentioned in a Q&A that he was a fan of Crystal Castles early on in their career, and he is now involved with the electronic project Epileptic, which have some Witch House adjacent songs and imagery. Another issue I have with Decadence is that there are no movie samples. The samples added a lot of atmosphere and contrast to the music and made Lifelover stand out from most other bands. The main problem, however, is the increased metal influence and the lack of truly beautiful songs. Complaining about metal influence on an EP that is labeled as depressive black metal might sound stupid, but it's the type of metal that's the issue. I'm not talking about an increased amount of tremolo riffing or screaming, but tough guy riffs that could fit in a new metal song. Aside from these gripes, there are some amazing moments on Decadence, especially the songs Lethargy and Androider. Lethargy sounds like an evolution of the punk songs on Pulver, but a bit more fleshed out and melancholic. The only downside of the song is the heavy riff that comes in the end and ruins the vibe slightly. Androider brings back some of the groove from Pulver and has a vocal performance from Kim that is on the same level of manic as Brand from Konkurs. The usage of piano on the song is unique from other songs, only adding groove instead of playing melancholic melodies. Myspys is Lifelover's biggest song on Spotify, with almost 4 million streams. Personally, I don't think it's on the level of any of the tracks on Erotik or Konkurs, but I can see why it's popular. For the most part, it's a great melancholic, punk-influenced song like Lethargy and Androider, but my issue with it is once again the heavy riff that comes towards the end of the song and throw things off. Destinationingenstans has the same issue. It starts out very good, in the same vein as Lethargy, then a solemn clean guitar part comes, and if the song had just repeated these sections, it would have been great, but then another tough guy riff comes and ruins the vibe. Luguber Framtid and Major are somewhere in between the more metal-influenced sections and the punk sections, more aggressive but without the new metal riffs. These tracks are pretty good and feels like a more logical evolution of Lifelover's sound when they want to sound more aggressive. Visdomsord sounds more like something that could have been on the earlier albums, being a more down-tempo song like Mitanexia from Konkurs or Saltvatten from Erotik. In 2010, B started uploading songs to MySpace with a new project called Woundism. The page for the band is now almost empty, so information about the project is hard to find, but according to Metal Archives, Non from the Decadence EP was also involved and provided vocals and lyrics. 5 songs have been preserved from the MySpace page and uploaded to YouTube, these being Disease, Locust Swarm, Pulsating Hate, Seditious Libel, and Circumscriptor. While some of the songs have some black metal influence, such as Circumscriptor and Seditious Libel, Woundism was more influenced by death metal, as apparent on songs like Pulsating Hate. Out of all the available Woundism tracks, Disease is probably the one that Lifelover fans would appreciate the most, since it's reminiscent of the band, and it would be turned into a Lifelover song a few months later. In the beginning of 2011, Lifelover released the album Sjukdom for Prophecy Productions, on which Disease had been rewritten into the song Horans Hora. If Decadence was divisive when it released, it doesn't come close to Sjukdom, with some fans calling the album great and some calling it the worst in Lifelover's catalog. Personally, I think the album has a lot of amazing moments, but also some less enjoyable ones. The samples and programmed drums are back, which is a plus, but the groovy and chugging riffs that appeared on Decadence are more frequent and at times ruin what could have been good songs. On the songs led by Misfortune and Doften av Tomhet, the metal riffing works well and adds contrast to Kim's screaming and the beautiful piano parts. But the same can't be said for Totus Anctus. The riffs on the song sound almost like nu metal, like on Decadence, and I'm thinking of bands like Dope rather than Deftones. And this makes the lyrics feel more teen angsty than they would have done if they were used on Erotik or Konkurs, especially in the middle of the song, where the clean vocal part is followed by one of these nu metal riffs, which is the only part in Lifelover's whole discography that feels a tiny bit cringe. Another issue with the song is B's vocal performance, which sounds uninspired and awkward, and this also applies to the song Becksvart frustration. On En man i sina sämsta år from Erotik, LR used the same type of delivery, but there it had more energy and added variation to the album, but here it just doesn't work for me. Even though these songs bring down the overall impression of the album, there are several amazing songs on here, some of which are among my favorite Lifelover tracks. The openers Svart Galla and Expandera are beautiful songs in the same league as MS Salmonella and Cancertid, with bittersweet piano melodies. Svart Galla in particular is one of the best Lifelover songs ever, with Kim's intense vocals and some heavier riffs being contrasted by the beautiful melodic sections, just like in MS Salmonella. The songs Nedvaknande and Instrumental Asylum are two of the most overlooked songs in Lifelover's entire discography, probably since their place towards the end of the album. Nedvaknande has an early Catatonia vibe, but with an almost euphoric melody that comes in the verses. The lyrics of the song Courtesy of 1853 are some of the most well-written on the album, and Kim's vocal performance with both clean vocals and screams are also great. The song is like a continuation of the classic Lifelover sound, but with some refreshing more melodic elements, and I wish they would have went in this direction on the rest of the album instead of the death metal meets nu metal route. Instrumental Asylum is, as the title says, an instrumental song that's just like Nedvaknande, very melodic and almost epic. The only thing that's missing is Kim screaming and a movie sample, and it would have been one of Lifelover's best songs. Speaking of samples, the movie samples on the album is mostly centered around anti-drug propaganda. The one in Led by Misfortune is taken from the 1949 movie Wild Weeds.
Congratulations! Now you'll start living! My head is so light it feels like it's floating!
That's because your troubles are all gone.
I haven't been able to find the original sample to Homicidal Tendencies, but the clip have been used in a documentary about Harry J. Anslinger and the movie Reefer Madness, and clips about the movie Assassin of Youth, so it's from some type of anti-weed movie. Aside from anti-drug PSA samples, the song Sånt är livet by Anita Lindblom is sampled on Horans Hora.
Sånt är livet, så mycket falskhet bor här.
The artwork for the album is the most abstract one for any Lifelover release and doesn't really resemble anything in particular. It was actually an art project made by Kim and his friend Robin Fjell, which they made out of wood, barbed wire, blood and cloth. More pictures of the project can be seen in the booklet of the album. A limited edition box set of Sjukdom also came with some barbed wire and a piece of cloth with the Lifelover logo on it, alongside a syringe and a razor. A little more than half a year after Sjukdom was released, B sadly passed away on the 9th of September, reportedly from an accidental overdose. This was the beginning of the end for Lifelover, since B was the co-founder of the band, the main songwriter, and obviously a close friend to the members. After B's death, the band played a few shows in the fall of 2011 as a tribute to B, and then a few more in 2015 to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Lifelover. It also seems like now in 2025, the band Kall, which is a semi-follow-up to Lifelover, will perform a set at Prophecy Fest, where they play Lifelover songs to celebrate the band's 20-year anniversary. Aside from live shows, all Lifelover albums have been kept in print by the labels Osmose Productions and Prophecy Productions to keep Lifelover's legacy alive. Even though Lifelover is since long disbanded and will likely never release a new song, the band members have been active with other projects, some of which started when Lifelover was active and some of which are new. Starting out with B's side projects, he didn't have as many as some of the other band members. Before and during Lifelover, he had the aforementioned Dimhymn, which didn't release any new material after 2006. A new album was however in the works before B passed away. It was supposed to be called Sakrala Hymner and released later in 2011, but sadly wasn't finished before B's passing and never released. He was also supposedly a member of the cult classic Swedish black metal band Eskapi during the period 2005 to 2007. However, he was never credited on any songs by the band, so it's unknown exactly what he did in the band, except that he's listed as a guitarist on Metal Archives. The only credit B has on any Eskapi album is the artwork for the 2010 album Arisen from the Ashes. During the later half of Lifelover's career, B also had two side projects for ideas that didn't fit in Lifelover, one being Woundism, which I talked about earlier, and one being the band IXXI. IXXI, Roman numerals for a certain tragic event in American history, was a band B had together with some members of Eskapi. B played guitar, and the music was pretty straightforward black metal with some groovier sections. It kind of sounded like a better version of the more metallic songs on Sjukdom. Kim, on the other hand, has had a ton of side projects, both during and after Lifelover, plus a bunch of collaborations with other musicians. His main band before, during and after Lifelover was Hypothermia. I have seen Hypothermia been labeled as a side project and been recommended to people as a continuation of Lifelover, but this is in my opinion very wrong. As I just said, and also in the beginning of the video, Hypothermia started before Lifelover and was the band that gave Kim his initial fame. The music is honestly nothing like Lifelover either. Early Hypothermia, with albums like Veins or the Självdestruktivitet tapes, were all about repetitive riffs, an atmosphere that will put you in a trance. Basically the opposite of Lifelover songs with clear structure and catchy riffs. The lyrics and aesthetics is also different, being more based around nature and themes more personal to Kim. In 2008, Hypothermia would change lineup again and move further away from black metal. The more recent releases sound more like post-metal, with more clean guitar sections, and the only thing that really keeps the band in the DSPM tag is Kim screaming on some of the albums. Aside from Hypothermia, Kim also had the projects Kyla and Life is Pain around 2005 to 2006. Kyla was a solo project under which he released a full-length album called Glory of Negativity, 2 demos and a split with a project by Nachtzeit called Life Neglected. The music sounded kinda similar to early Hypothermia, but with mostly shorter songs that weren't quite as hypnotic as Hypothermia's. Life is Pain was a collaboration together with the Czech DSPM musician Trist. Only one demo called Bloody Melancholy was released in 2006, and it sounds like Trist's music, but with Kim Karlsson's intense vocals over. It's a shame that only 18 minutes worth of music was released from this project, because Trist's instrumentation and Kim's vocals goes really well together, and a full-length album wouldn't have been wrong. Shortly before Lifelover ended, Kim started the project Horns Emerging. Originally it featured Audrey Sylvain, who people may know from the bands Amateurs and Peste Noire, but her involvement didn't last for long. Her singing is however present on the song Spleen, released in 2011, and is available on Bandcamp alongside a self-titled track. Spleen is probably the most beautiful song in Kim's discography, with the atmospheric elements from late Hypothermia being complemented by Audrey's singing. After Lifelover ended, Kim have had a bunch of other projects aside from Hypothermia. He has made ambient music under the names Consider and A Symphony to the Void, and has done vocal appearances on albums by bands like Black Hate and Ardling, but most importantly, he have the bands Kall and Ritualm. The most notable out of these two are Kall, which can kind of be seen as a continuation of Lifelover, since it features the members Fix and H on guitars, although the music doesn't have much in common with Lifelover. The first song they released in 2013, called Då nu jag och du, is the only one of theirs that sounds a bit like their previous band, and could have fit in on the second half of Konkurs. The song even has a sample from the TV show Rederiet that was sampled on Narcotic Devotion, but this time it's the answer to the quote in the end of the song.
Kanske är någonting som du skulle tänka på ibland också. Man kan inte vara bäst på allting!
All the music released after this sounds more like post-metal bands like Cult of Luna, but with Kim screaming and some occasional more black metal-inspired riffs and drumming. The music is also more organic than Lifelover's, with the real drums. The drums on the first single were handled by the same Patrick that played drums on the first Hypothermia demos, according to Metal Archives. On the first self-titled full-length album from 2014, the drums are being played by AQC from the band KFCL, and on the 2020 follow-up Brand, they're played by Peter Lindqvist from Canopy. There is also some saxophone on songs like Försök till förstörelse and Varelsen, which are being played by Sofia Hedman, and on these songs 1853 is also credited for the lyrics. A side note is that the sample on Hide Below from Brand is the same one as on Apati's song Kemisk kärlek, and comes from the TV series Percy tårar.
Det finns bara en sann glädje här i livet. Och det är kemisk glädje.
Moving on to Kim's other band, Ritualm was actually started around the same time Erotik was released, together with LR, and the project was meant for ideas that didn't fit Lifelover, but no music was released until 2013. Then the EP Tuss Mörker was released, which consisted of dark ambient, which at times were dark and disturbing, and at times beautiful. This lineup of Ritualm didn't last for long, and no new music was released until 2021. Then the project was resurrected, but with Kim and 1853 instead of LR. They released an EP and a single of dark ambient before they took a more interesting route in 2024. The EP Dit ruset tar oss complemented the ambient with trap drums and acid techno elements, which on paper might sound terrible, but everything is mixed in such a way that it sounds very psychedelic and otherworldly. Now in 2025, they have switched up the sound once again on the album This Is Not Lifelover. Instead of ambient, they delve into styles such as shoegaze, post-metal, and occasionally trip-hop. The cover art is a callback to Pulver, with Kim himself reenacting the original cover art. Aside from making music, Kim is also a painter, making art using things such as his own blood, coffee and wine. The art he's making is very abstract and can be seen online and on some Hypothermia cover arts, like Kaffe and Blod too. 1853 also have some projects of his own, aside from Ritualm, together with CL from the bands Vanhelga and Glädjekällor. He had the project Eskapi, which out of all these Lifelover related bands, probably is the hardest to get into for the average Lifelover fan. The music is based around Swedish rap music rather than metal, and can sound somewhat awkward if you're not into the more abstract side of underground rap. However, on the album Välkommen till overkligheten, some samples from the early Lifelover albums reappear. On the track Vargar och får, the movie Ett hål i mitt hjärta is sampled, and on Hej då, Fucking Åmål is sampled. A few years ago, 1853 also got involved with the Witch House adjacent group Epileptics, for which he does live DJing. He's also done vocals for Vanhelga, for example on the album Längtan, and also written lyrics for Glädjekällors song Alternativ uppvaknande. He also plays in or have involvement in the bands Deprimat, Nerjak and Metamorphos, which I haven't gotten around to listening to yet. The other members of Lifelover doesn't have quite as many side projects as Kim or 1853, but the members LR, H and Non have some projects aside from Kall. LR have the noise project Stug Besengal together with Johan Olof from the weird Christian black metal band Reverorum Ibn Malach. H was a member of the Swedish melodic punk band Sällskapsresan, and Non is a member of the black metal bands Malign and Monstrat, and was previously a member of Kafsiel. During Lifelover's short lifespan, they managed to inspire a whole new wave of DSBM bands that incorporated post-punk elements and some of Lifelover's aesthetics in their albums. The most famous out of these bands are Apati. While the band is pretty well respected nowadays, they have gotten their fair share of hate for being a Lifelover ripoff. There are many elements that both bands share, such as the Swedish media samples and post-punk elements, but this isn't really enough to call Apati a ripoff, because if that was the case, then Lifelover would be a Woods of Infinity ripoff. On Apati's first album Euphorie, their music is more based in black metal than Lifelover, and on their second album Morgondagen inställd i brist på intresse, their music is more varied, with elements of, for example, shoegaze and post-rock. Apati's titles and samples are also more on the nose about depression and drug usage than Lifelover's. The only Apati song I've heard that feels like a Lifelover ripoff is Hustov of Euphorie, more specifically the ending. The sample from the TV show Riket, laid over pianos, followed by the vocalist screaming, is an idea directly ripped from Lifelover's song I Love to Hurt You.
Och där, Sverige, hugget i granit, dansk jävlar. Dansk jävlar!
Unrelated to Lifelover, Apati have also ripped the guitars to Lämna mig i fred from Alcest's song Ciel Errant. Apati sadly met the same fate as Lifelover, with the vocalist Obehag passing away in 2011. Since then the other vocalist and lyricist C9H13N have went on to form the band Oftrykia, where he has moved away from the urban melancholy aesthetic of Lifelover and more towards nature. Two other bands I personally enjoy more than Apati, and that I feel have taken the Lifelover influence and made something more unique, is Vanhelga and Psychonaut 4. Starting off with Vanhelga, their music is much more melodic than Lifelover's, in almost a joyful way that reminds me of the Swedish style of melodic punk called trallpunk. The vocal performances sounds quite similar to Lifelover, but the band adds some effects to them like echoes, which gives Vanhelga their own identity. 1853 have made some vocal appearances on albums like Längtan and Sommar, which is a reason for the similarities. My favorite of the Lifelover inspired bands are Psychonaut 4. They have the same post-punk influence as Lifelover and include unusual instruments such as accordion and piano in their music, but they have their own identity and end up sounding pretty different from Lifelover. The main reason is probably the vocals, which are more high-pitched and sound desperate. It seems like Kim Karlsson also enjoyed the band, because he joined them live once when they performed their cover of Nackskott. Lifelover's influence isn't limited to black metal, but have even seeped into alternative rap music. Sad Boys and Drain Gang, who are some of the biggest artists to come out of the SoundCloud and cloud rap scene, are major Lifelover fans. They have been wearing Lifelover merch, put their music in a tour vlog and several DJ mixes, and Janglin have even sampled the song Dödens Landsväg on his song Primal Fear, released under his side project Jonathan Leandoer 127. Another underground rapper that owes some of his early success to Lifelover is Cemetery. On his early mixtapes, he sampled a lot of Lifelover songs, such as Lethargy and Cancertid, on the songs Shotgun and Creatine. These songs were part of the reason he started gaining traction in the underground rap scene, and the samples were a big part of the appeal and what made him sound unique. Sampling Lifelover is possibly becoming something of a trend, because now in 2025 they have been sampled once again, this time by rapper Baby Goyard. On the song Fenway of his latest album Tastemaker, the song Stängt PGA Semester off of Konkurs is sampled. Even though most of these samples probably aren't cleared, they hopefully give Lifelover some more attention and help carry on the band's legacy. Lifelover split up over a decade ago, but their music still lives on and are more popular now than ever. Hopefully the band's fanbase continue to grow, so the band gets their proper recognition and gets brought up in discussions about Sweden's all-time greatest metal and punk bands. Thanks for watching.